hello. Wherever you are in the world, we are so glad that you joined us. I'm Christine Barnhart, your host for Supply Chain Unfiltered. This is where we provide a candid look at the challenges that supply chain professionals face and bring in forward thinkers and innovators to share their insights on the strategies, technologies, and collaborative efforts shaping the future of supply chain. So please take a minute before we get started and let us know where you're located today by posting in the chat. So I'm at home in Evansville, Indiana. I know 2 months in a row, who would have thought? But happy to actually see my husband and family and whatnot. So let me know where you're at. We'd love to give you a shout out. So we have an action-packed agenda this morning. Super excited about our guest. So we're not going to waste any time. We're going to pull him right on into the podcast. Welcome, Philip. We are so happy that you're here this morning. Philip is the Chief Commercial and Market Officer for OMP. So I would love for you to tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you, Christine. Very excited to be here as well. And just as you called out, luckily I made it to Atlanta because I had a very delayed flight overnight, but I'm here in Atlanta, Georgia at our OMP headquarters too in Georgia. So a little bit about myself. So in my role as Chief Commercial and Markets Officer, I cover and I'm very passionate about the overall global commercial operations and expansion of OMP. And in that, I focus on the expansion into new markets. New and emerging markets as well, like ANZ, like Japan, LATAM, and so forth. Also focusing on the business alliances that we go to market with and our technology ecosystem build as OMP and Nulogy grow closer together as well. The OMP strategic community build, the Gartner Connect with 0-100 as well. And overall, just ensuring from a vision point of view that we are heading out the right direction and fuel the roadmap and the vision globally in all of the industries. But to me, mainly, look, just as you, passionate about exploration, discovery, and new worlds.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first time I met you, you and I kind of hit it off because we both like this vision that supply chain, right, can solve the problems in the world, which I love. So, I don't know that our audience appreciates what your schedule is like. Philip is incredibly busy, so I appreciate you taking 30 minutes out of your day to talk.
Super happy about it. I know we had to plan it for a while, but I'm super happy about it. So thank you for giving the opportunity here. Yes.
I love it. Looks like we have a pretty good crowd already on the podcast this morning. I see Pittsburgh, I see Tennessee, I see Austin, Texas, and Toronto, Canada. So we got the Americas covered.
Yes.
I find, Philip, that Europe tends to watch us on the replay.
Okay.
So we'll get those statistics later. So let's just jump right in. I would love to get your perspective because you've been doing this a long time. How have things changed in the last year or two? And given what I'm going to call the current hyper-dynamic geopolitical, environment, how have things changed in the context, in particular, for supply chain and planning?
Yeah, so I've been doing this now for just over 25 years. And my first 3-4 years were actually out of Europe, and the last 22 out of the US. So it's also good to see the difference between the regions and how to deal with supply chain challenges as well. And if I look at the last 2, 3, 4 years, I would say, even just looking at the 5 years mark, it's about overlapping with the start of the pandemic, right? And that just seems like a minute ago. And if I would summarize a couple of those changes to my perception is one of the keynote speakers at Gartner Orlando worded it quite well. It was Peter Hinsen. It's actually a Belgian who was speaking in Orlando for Gartner. He called it a polycrisis. Like he's like, well, from the pandemic, it led to more kind of constant stream of disruptions, which led us into the need to responding faster and faster to all of those events coming up. And that's why concepts like decision-centric or insight-centric planning have become so big, and also crossing more than just the enterprise wall. So that's definitely one. The other one is the expectation of companies in driving or getting value out of a digital transformation. I feel, I know what you think, but I feel like the expectation is it needs to go faster, more incremental, and often more in a self-funding way. I don't know if you feel the same way.
No, agreed completely. I mean, my first big implementation was at Mead Johnson, and we did an SAP implementation during our IPO. And
Mm-hmm.
it was, more than $100 million investment. It took, like 22 months, which for a global SAP implementation is great, right?
Yep.
But you start to think about those numbers, the payback was like 6 or 7 years. And
Yep.
and I just don't think companies have the appetite for that in today's
No.
climate.
Indeed. And next to the appetite, there's also concepts like even look at 3 years ago, no one had heard yet on true Gen AI or
Right.
even less about agentic. And now the expectation is rightfully so because a big bet is on productivity to embed those concepts more and the functionality more in every digital transformation and drive value through them as well.
Right.
That to me is very key to take into account and just to build up in the enterprise platform as well. And then maybe a question to you as well, because we're seeing that the boundaries of the enterprise are blurring out. So, for example, a supply chain planner is not looking anymore just at what's happening in the manufacturing distribution operations of their logo or their company, but looking beyond that to suppliers. And that's where we come in together as well, I think, as a good complement from an ecosystem point of view, right?
Yeah, it's interesting that concept right there is actually what drove me out of manufacturing and into technology, right?
Yeah.
I had been a planner, I was, and honestly, some wonderful tools out there. OMP does a great job, but it was like I would make these investments in new business processes and a new tool, and I
Yeah.
still had issues. And inevitably, when I would trace that back, it would be a material that didn't make a truck or an external manufacturer that started production late, so it got into the warehouse late. And
Yeah.
I'm one of the culprits, right? I can remember going into Whirlpool in the 90s and
Mm-hmm.
being one of the people going, this is not a core competency. We should move this to a third party, right? So we went from vertically
Yep.
integrated to having 20-30% of what we did with third parties. Unfortunately, I don't think we thought about what the ramifications were in times of disruption, right? So like when everything is predictable, it's
Yes.
easy, but we don't live in that reality now. I mean,
No.
which brings me really to my next question. So
Mm-hmm.
what do you think the biggest challenges are right now? Like what's keeping you up at night?
Good point. Well, I would say the biggest challenges I see and I'm confronted with on a daily basis is one, making sure we put the right business priorities in every digital transformation. Just exactly because when we talk about fueling a business case, it's about okay, what are you going to drive through that, and what can I expect? Every 6 months out of it. Is that productivity? Is that better inventory turns? Is that better management of my assets? Is that supplier visibility? So really concretizing that early on and setting the right expectations there is one, together with delivering faster, still not over promising, but delivering faster in a reality based way. That's another important one. And I see so last month, just to put the context in on how important it is and how big of a challenge it also is we had 3 innovation councils on how, from a solution point of view, we can help driving a better level of adoption and adherence to the solution. So to make sure it's not just used, but it's optimally used and it's let's say adhering to the level of autonomous that is expected as well. I think those are some key ones. I wanted to make one more note is people ask me quite a bit about, well, what's the importance still of green planning? Because sustainability was a top of mind priority for the board 2-3 years ago. And then you had, or even a year and a half ago, and then you had tariffs coming in and other so-called priorities. And if they would ask me, is sustainability and green planning still important? I answer, well, We see it still as dimension to take into account, but it is more balanced than it was before. It cannot be just driving
Right.
decisions without being still profitable or without taking into account the other C's like customer cash and cost.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think it's not extraneous. It has to
Mhm.
be part of how you do business. And I think, what I've seen is kind of companies adopting the attitude where it it's expected. It's part of business as usual now, right? Like
Right, right.
we want to minimize our impact to the environment. We want to minimize, the material, the waste and things of that nature. So I would agree with you.
Right.
I think that's exciting to see.
Yes,
It shouldn't be extra. It should be part of how we run our business every day, right?
exactly, indeed.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that a lot. So like, are there things that you're seeing in the industry in terms of like, are there critical changes that businesses are making that are just
Yeah.
really fundamentally different than what we saw 3 to 5 years ago?
I would call out two big ones. One is the way of thinking, the global thinking, and companies from a value chain point of view, not any like, having a good evolution in not anymore thinking in a siloed, more segmented way, but thinking, okay, how these global value streams will be affected by all of disruptions, and how can we build it in a more resilient way, and see where we should localize, where we should globalize more, and so that global thinking, that change of mindset is definitely there, and I think has still an evolution to go through because there's always some lead time to get it actually materialized. The other one is on yesterday, it was in a life science community event in New Jersey, and one of the key topics was I'll talk about the planner or the user of solutions of the future. There are very different expectations, and that role evolution is very important to one recognize and prepare for, but also on the source end, making sure that programs, universities, colleges work on that to be able to sync that up with the business roles that are in need. And that sync is, I believe, not entirely there yet.
I would agree. I don't think it's well designed or
Mhm.
well understood. I mean, I think right now a lot of the big even education um kind of organizations like I'm on the board for the Association of Supply Chain Management. I work with
Mhm.
supply chain leaders in action, and I think the question that we're all asking is, well, how are young people really getting their education, and where are they
Yep,
going? Is it
exactly.
deep dives in YouTube? Because the
Yeah.
traditional
Yep.
learning model that
Oh
maybe
yeah.
you or I used, it doesn't seem to be effective right now.
Exactly. And I think sometimes it's a little bit of a trial and error as well. I was talking to AstraZeneca yesterday, who's trying out through avatars and snippets to form a training in a very different way, just to get people, the younger force, more motivated and excited about working with solutions, working with processes, and adhering to them as well, right?
Yeah, I will tell you, since I started using Chat GPT, I'm kind of addicted, right? Like, where I would go out and just spend hours doing research and
Yeah.
following like an endless array of links, right? I go into Chat GPT. I've gotten much better at like wording my prompts to really give it the context that I want.
Yeah.
And then, it has, I know that it's shaved at least 50, 60% of the
Yeah.
time off
Yeah.
just in that one, case, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's part also of the when you look at it from a value point of view of the productivity expectations that companies have, but even for us from a solution provider point of view, how fast new consultants can onboard into the role and how they can access documentation and training elements, and so is already much faster. And now we just have to double it down on more advanced use cases as well to make their life easier.
Right. So I mean, on that note, I mean, in based on what you're seeing, how
Mhm.
has the digitization journey evolved for your customers? I mean, is it really different now, or is it just faster?
Um, Faster for sure. But if I look at how we position it, I see two big items. One is quality is still for us number one. We adhere to our 5 Ps, which are the values where the DNA is really in forging and building long-term partnerships. And for example, a P&G is over almost 30 years partner with us. J&J same. And to me, while the transformations themselves and new incremental scope extensions and so are running faster, that overarching umbrella of driving quality is still there.
Right.
And to me, I'm most passionate about really seeing customers get value out of it, and seeing that in, for example, the councils that we organize, the conference that we organize, and also learn, of course, from any hurdles that are coming up on how to further optimize their journeys, and covering the needs both from a tangible quantitative value point of view, but also from an happiness and being excited about working with the solution and the processes that were drawn out. So yes.
And I will say maybe a follow-up, because I think we could do a whole session on your councils. I got a little
Yeah.
behind the scenes last week with P&G on some of what's happening within the innovation councils. And I will say, and I've worked for other technology companies. I think your model of bringing together these large stakeholder groups and really diving into
Yep.
what is the problem and why aren't we solving it, right? I
Yeah.
love that, Philip. I think it's great.
Yeah, that's a good point. To me, it's also what is for me big in the innovation councils is having a representation from our core 6 industries that we cover. Because while consumer goods might be more ahead in certain areas, maybe chemicals or life science or metals are more ahead in others, like center of excellence buildup and so. And it's good to see their peer sharing, and that's also what they appreciate more, and saying, okay, I mean, we didn't expect that. So it's good to talk to some peers about a topic that we might not be as much ahead in, and that's a good learning for us as well. Yes.
So for people in the audience that maybe haven't heard the term before, and
Mhm.
Gartner has kind of called it connected planning, which is kind of what Nulogy has been talking about. I think OMP, decision-centric planning. Give
Yeah.
the audience a bit of a, like, what's that definition from your perspective? What does it look like and why is it important?
Yeah. Yeah, and there, I would say, many interpretations and definitions of connected planning. Because if I ask what Nestle means with connected planning, or J&J or General Mills, they will have slightly different meanings, right? But for to me, and how we bring it forward to the community, is that connected planning is a way of planning in an integrated way, both vertically and horizontally integrated. Vertically meaning blurring a bit the horizons from strategic to very execution operational, and being more centric based on decisions, events, insights that are coming in. So that's the
Right.
vertical aspect. The horizontal aspect is where we together come in as well, is being able to connect more and more real time as well between, of course, sourcing, manufacturing, and distribution operations, syncing it up with the demand, of course, as well, but going there beyond the wall. So from a sourcing point of view, for example, looking at the supplier connectivity and collaboration beyond the wall, so towards a tier 1, a tier 2 suppliers. And both, you mentioned earlier an example, both operationally. So in let's say, how do we respond? Do we respond if, for example, there is a batch declined, or there's a truck delayed, or a vessel delayed, or so? So both agile and reactive based on what's operationally happening, but also more strategic in understanding, hey, if in that region will be hit by a certain percentage of tariff, how can we mitigate that? How can we build resilience? What are alternative suppliers, for example, and working with the visibility to their capacity reservations, to the contract management and so forth as well. That to me is really a true end-to-end and beyond end-to-end
Right.
connected planning.
And it seems to me that, I think when I think about, like, when I started in supply chain, we talked a lot about S&OP, right? And
Yep.
the monthly cycle. It seems to me that the technology now is to the
Yep.
point that we truly can do sales and operations execution, but
Yep.
we can blur the line between what is S&OP and what is S&OE, because we have the technology to have that real-time data, right? Or
Exactly.
near real-time data, which, in 2008, when I went to meet Johnson, if I got an update from a supplier once a week or once every 2 weeks, like that was world class, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
and it's interesting because I think that your tools they've been there for a long time. It's been that multi-enterprise connectivity that was really missing
Yep.
in a lot of context.
Yeah, it's a combination of the multi-enterprise connectivity and also exactly as you say, right? The lines are fading, also from an approach and process point of view between, for example, SNOP, and even sometimes between the network design and the strategic capacity management and the layers of SNOP and SNOE. And with that, you get into a mode of being more always on and more
Right.
driven by decisions you have to take. But that also means, and that's why we built in the last year a complete new framework to be able to run that more always on type of planning and on the fly run whatever amount of scenarios based on US versus Canada. What are the tariffs that are likely coming up? Run all the scenarios, and then when it actually plays out, pick the one out of it that is best fit and make it also operational at that time. And that's key indeed.
Yes. It's interesting when I talk to boomers and Gen Xers like myself, I tend to explain it as virtual vertical integration. I'm like, you don't want to own that asset, but you want to be able to manage it and plan it and
Yep.
execute it like you do own it, right? And so
Yeah,
I
exactly.
like the concept of blurring the lines.
Exactly. And it's what I would call like the extended visibility and
Right.
management. Like you don't indeed own the asset, but you have that level of visibility over it that you can make decisions, of course, in collaboration
Right.
with, but anticipate much faster than when you're in an open loop and you need to wait until feedback comes back and you're basically too late to the facts to respond to an event or a disruption that's happening indeed. Yes.
So I want you to get out your crystal ball for me here and tell
Mm.
me what lies ahead for supply chains from your perspective.
What lies ahead for supply chains? Um, I one is what we already was talking about. I think the two things: one, collaboration between players in the market. So, like from a client supplier relation, that will get tighter in a tighter loop over time. Because while technology wise it's possible, sometimes you have other hurdles coming into play, like on the data security, on legal aspects, and so forth, on sometimes regional aspects as well. So I think further optimizing and synchronizing that is key. What we also see between actually some of our customers that are collaborating and sometimes playing CMO for each other is to tighten the technology ecosystems between them as well and correctly complementing each other in that sense as well. And then, of course, when you look at that, look at the buzzwords, agentic is a big one right now that everyone is talking about. For me, it's the ability to use the right agents from a value use case point of view in automating planning more, and the role of the planner will be focused more on analytics, on validating, and on anticipating than just running numbers and interactively touching numbers, right?
Right. I think for me, the promise there is there's always been so much just non-value added activity,
Mm-hmm.
gathering the data, cleansing the
Right.
data, making sure that the data is, what you want it to be, or even like routine tasks that you're like,
Yep.
God, this is so boring. I don't want to do this. I love that the technology finally is there. And people trust it because I think that's the other key thing we didn't talk about because,
Yes.
like there's a lot of analysts out there that are like, oh, in 2 years, you're not going to recognize supply chain and
Mm-hmm.
manufacturing. And maybe I'm jaded, but I don't buy that, right? I've worked for a
Right.
lot of big companies. Maybe the technology is capable, but I'm not sure people are capable of change that quickly. But I think we are in a paradigm shift. I think people have gotten used to
Yep.
managing their supercomputer, right, on a regular basis. So I am excited, and I knew you would have to hit on AI because it's just such
Yeah.
an integral part of where everybody's making investments.
Yeah, and it's also how fast then you can start running as well. Like last week, I was in Basel in one of the quantum computer facilities there, and when they presented then some of the use cases cross not just in supply chain planning, but beyond that, and see like what the impact could be. We're also testing with that mainly from an optimization point of view. And you fast forward 5 to 10 years, I think the capabilities are infinite, right? So it's
Right.
nice to see. Yes.
So, I mean, I'm going to ask you a pointed question. Why Nulogy, Philip? Why is there a relationship between OMP and Nulogy?
Yeah, I think the bottom line there is that based on what I mentioned earlier, the need for that multi-enterprise planning, and what we cannot do is have a easy consolidated integration with all these data parameters in real time coming from suppliers that are using different systems. So harmonizing that and creating that multi-enterprise visibility, to me, that's where the 1+1 is multi, more than two for sure.
I think it's an area that our two companies' missions align.
Right.
Because you hit on this earlier about like, how do we start delivering value faster, right? And so,
Yes,
you know,
yes.
Nulogy has made a ton of investments in Connect and our DaaS solution and whatnot, really with this goal of how can we make it easier for suppliers and their customers to connect to one another, because it shouldn't be difficult, right? It shouldn't take weeks and a team of IT professionals to
Exactly.
create that connectivity, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Look, I lived that when I was with Berry Plastics, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
somebody would be like, "Oh, we got to make a change to the EDI," and you're like, "Oh
Yep.
my God, do you know how complicated this is?" So,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I love that we now live in the realm of like low code, no code integration and APIs and whatnot. So we are actually almost out of time. So what is your one piece of advice that you would give the people listening to the podcast today?
Well, my one piece of advice is when you'll hear AI as a term in all kind of interpretations. And what's interesting is just last week, Gartner released one of the hype cycles, but specifically on AI and all its components, and not all are directly connected to supply chain planning. But it's interesting to read through them and say, okay, pick out of those the ones that to you are most valuable, and create some pioneer and test cases as soon as possible, because having that embedded in planning, and we provide it from a solution point of view, but you need to have also the right governance around it, the right circle of let's say expectations around it and so forth. So I think that's one to really double down on, provide also the right resource investment of time into it and so forth, and that all supports the journey to more autonomous planning.
So how can folks connect with you, Philip? Like because I can guarantee that we have a lot of questions that we didn't get to answer today.
Yeah, so the easiest is, okay, you can, of course, go to the website to understand more about OMP solution, unison planning. And so you connect to me on LinkedIn as well. I'm quite agile in responding there. And I'll provide also on that platform some other research work and ebooks that we can provide to give some inspiration to you.
I love it. And when's your next event? You got anything coming up?
Let's see. Next event coming up is, well, we have a big event coming up towards end of year, which is our yearly conference under the Real Solutions, Real Results umbrella, which will take place at a quite inspiring place. It's in Fort Lauderdale, Miami, and that will be on the 18th and 19th of November. So anyone who would like to see me there,
it's a great time to be in Florida too in mid-November.
Post hurricane season, exactly. Yes, absolutely.
So the same would be true for me. LinkedIn is the best way to get in touch with me. I'm pretty good about responding to everybody as quickly as possible. We did have one question and we have 1 minute. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to ask you this question from Odetta. She wants to know how often you've seen working built-in like data series cleaning agents within planning systems and as well as optimization agents.
I'll answer first on the data cleansing or data management agents. We see that as, I would say, the fastest growing one. It's under the umbrella of, we have a function called Data Genie that's focused just on the ability to agent-based assess data, synthesize or create some synthetic data where attributes are missing, and make it visible also where there is inaccuracy, where there are gaps in data input, and really take that on in a very pragmatic way. I think when I look, for example, yesterday at some of our life science clients that were with us, what they call VUCA is the variability, uncertainty, and so forth of data. That was the key point where they need to also foresee their right ownership and resources for to be able to handle that. Yes.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay, great. I'm glad we got one question in. If
Yes.
anybody has any additional questions, please reach out to either myself or Philip directly on LinkedIn, and we will definitely get back to you. So unfortunately, Philip, our 30 minutes is up. I told
No.
you it would
Yeah,
go
it goes fast, right? Yes.
super fast. Thank you
Yes.
so much for being here. This has been delightful. And I can't wait to see you again and in the
Yes.
fall, and hopefully you have a great summer.
Well, you too, Christine.
Alrighty. So I would be remiss if we left this morning or this afternoon, depending upon where you are in the world, and I did not give a shout out to our show producer, Let's Talk Supply Chain, and encourage you to take a look at the wonderful work that they're doing to build up supply chain communities. So if you're struggling to find a community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts, look no further. Sarah and her team at Let's Talk Supply Chain have created the Secret Society of Supply Chain to provide a safe space. They offer unique opportunities for everyone to connect and grow in 3 distinct and value-packed communities: the supply chainers, the women in supply chain, and the creative room. So do yourself a favor, head over. It's kind of long, but it's secretsocietyofsupplychain.com. Pretty easy to explore which community was made for you. I also need to thank our show sponsor, Nulogy, an innovator in supply chain technology focused on decreasing the friction between suppliers and customers to everyone's benefit through collaboration and synchronization. On that note, we must say goodbye, but I'm hopeful that we connect again in the future, and everybody have a great summer, and we'll see you soon.